Any questions?
Thank you so much for that. That was very informative and organized. I'd love to know about what your product internship at Ripcord has been like. What have been some of your favorite things?
That's a great question. So it's actually, you don't have an internship when you're a KP product fellow unless you're an MBA. So if you're an MBA, then there's a possibility for an internship or just to get it like after your MBA is done, like full time. For all of us undergrads, it's just straight up we graduate and we're just full time there. So it's been a very, very different. I was mentioning that because it's very different having my first full time role versus just previously interning, right? Unlike many of you that have had like 7+ years of just awesome full time experience, it's a big change for me. So I'd say that. I think one thing that could be useful for me to answer this question is to compare how it is at a startup versus like a large company for PM. At large companies, you're essentially put through APM programs, which are minimum 2, typically 3 rotations, where the rotations are on different types of products, right? You'll have a very design-centric product that is really focused on the user research, user interviews, whether it be focus groups or whether it just be like, A/B reach outs or even so that, and then designing the product, right? That's like a design centric and a very communication based like product cycle when you're at like that 6 or 8 month rotation in an APM program. So they have a design rotation typically, as I described, and then they have like a more technical product where you're mainly working with like backend engineers, not too many designers, probably no designers on your team in that case, and you're basically like just seeing, and everyone's also observing too, is this person like really good as a technical PM? And then the last rotation is either one of the previous ones that you've showed that you really liked a lot or that you excelled at, or it's something that's like very different. Like it could be something towards the end of the product life cycle where you're just focused on essentially marketing and launching the product, right? Or it could be something that's like more strategy driven, right? Instead of technical or design heavy. So that's what it looks like in an APM program at a large company from what I've seen. And this is actually what Brett Taylor mentioned when I was at Salesforce, because we would get dinners with him all the time. And Brett Taylor said something interesting. He said, you don't need an MBA when you're in the Salesforce APM program, because he tries to have Salesforce's program replace a lot of the stuff that MBAs teach you. I mean, regardless of that, basically what he's saying, and he also mentioned this separately too, is he tries to make it so that you can come in not knowing any product. And then by the time you leave those 3 rotations of the APM program, you're able to hit the ground running and then become like a PM somewhere else. If not, well, yeah, not a senior PM, but just like a PM somewhere else after those APM programs, right? Because you have 3 8-month rotations, roughly 2 years. So that's like a perk of being in the APM program, where if you don't have any product experience prior, if you're coming from like consulting pre-MBA, or if you're coming from like IB, APM program can ease you into solely. Whereas with startups, it's super different. This is actually one of the main pulls for me. I noticed that at startups, and this is also something that Brett said, he was just saying that you hit the ground running. There's like less mentorship, but if you know what you're doing and you have some prior product experience, you're going to get so much out of it because there's so many things thrown at you. And yeah, you're forced to wear different hats, but if you know how to do product properly, you're wearing those hats from the product lens, and you're just expanding your product, your product tool set, like just very comprehensively on the design side, like on like the legal side, on the business side, communication side, stakeholder, like, persuasion side, stuff like that. And basically that's the main difference, right? You're formally kind of taught everything about product on a week by week kind of like check-in basis. You have mentors for everything across the board. And by the time you're done, you're comfortable in knowing some product, right? Whereas if you already know a lot of product, then I'd say KP is like a good path, because things are so hectic that like, sometimes like my manager doesn't always have, time to like mentor me like easily, but he told me exactly where to go. You can ask this guy if you need something for this, but when I have time, I can help you out with that. You basically have to be really resourceful and kind of like know what product is. When you hit the ground running, you will learn so much in 1 year at like a lot of these KP portfolio companies that I've seen people like just spend a couple years at KP portfolio companies and then become like a startup PM at places like Samsara or Neuro that require 5-6 years plus PM experience, because you're just doing so many things and learning like at a crazy amount at a KP portfolio company. So that's another thing. You learn so much there. Whereas at like larger companies, at some of the larger companies I've been at, I stopped learning at the 7-week point out of 12 weeks. It was crazy. And I was taking on 2 to 3 projects at the same time. but I still like stopped learning. At startups, I can see that not happening at all. Like at Ripcord, I'm learning so much. And even if you're staying on one product, like siloed on it, that product, just like in the nascent nature of a startup, it's evolving to the point where you're learning just sticking with that one product, let alone you're probably gonna be working on 2 products at the same time that are all over the place. So you learn so much. You can literally, after 3 to 4 years of doing it right at a KP startup, easily be a senior PM or even hop in as a director of PM and not be confused and not like fail at the job. So that's what I've seen. And I can definitely see myself already kind of going towards that trajectory right now, which is hopefully that answered your question, Jenna, of how Ripcord is. But I know I didn't fully answer that, but that's like a big company versus small company PM comparison, especially when these small companies, you know, they're not just like, I guess, random small companies. Like KP invests in them for a reason. And not only that, if a KP startup is not doing well, if they don't have the proper headcount of PMs, they won't ask for product fellows. That's just like, that's essentially asking for someone that's essentially asking for a product manager when all you have is a company that, let's say, had COVID cuts, has like 10 engineers reporting to like a C-suite member, right? There's no space for a product manager in between. It's too flat for that. So basically, to have a product manager at a KP company, it needs to be having like a really high growth trajectory. It needs to be like considered hyper growth, or it needs to be like, you know, just doing really well to the point where they're rapidly hiring. Then they'll have product fellows come in either as interns or full-time. And you know that you'll be hitting the ground running, learning a lot. And basically you'll have crazy exposure to like people that are like upper leadership, right? Like, for example, I have exposure to like the CEO, Alex Fielding, and the CEOs of all of these like KP-backed companies have just done awesome stuff. Alex Fielding actually was, he worked really closely with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak early days at Apple. He left with Steve Wozniak. They founded a startup, got acquired. He's been advising companies and started Ripcord 2017. Basically, this guy, he's just an awesome guy. And you have exposure to people like that because there's very few PMs at these KP-backed startups in general. They're kept at a good size. If they're at too large of a size, sometimes they may not take KP product fellows, right? So KP makes sure to place you at like a good stage, I think. Any more questions?
Yeah, I've got